All right, today is, what day is it? It's the 3rd. What does that mean? It's election day.
It's election day.
So, in Photoshop today, we're going to make our own election campaign signs for the yard signs. So, go into Photoshop and click Create New. And we're going to go to print up here, just like InDesign. There's print, art and illustration, photo, web, mobile, and film and video. Yes, you can edit film and video in Photoshop. Is it great? No, it's not. But you can. You can also edit photos. You can do illustrations. A lot of people paint in Photoshop and do these really complex illustrations. And then again, web, mobile, whatever. So we're going to print, and we're going to make a custom size. So we're going to do, our width is going to be 24 inches by 18 inches. This is the standard size for a yard sign. We're going to leave resolution. Resolution is something new to you guys. It means how many pixels fit into 1 square inch. So if I took this and printed it out and I measured a 1 inch by 1 inch box, how many pixels fit inside of it? For print, you typically want to be at least 300, 250 at the lowest. On web, it's 72 pixels per inch because the 300 pixels is a huge file to download. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to leave it at 300 for now because we're going with the idea in mind that we're going to send this to a printer later. Here in Photoshop, you can actually set your color mode. So does anybody remember the 2 color modes we have? CMYK, which is used for what? Print. And RGB, which is web. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to switch it to CMYK. Now, just to let you know, in Photoshop, if you make something in CMYK, every so often there's a couple filters that don't work when you have it on CMYK mode. If you make it in RGB and then you place it into it and then you go and print it, it's okay. It will still print, no problem. So today we're just going to go ahead and leave in RGB because we're not being that finicky with a printer. The printers nowadays, like any desktop printer or whatever, actually knows how to convert from RGB to CMYK automatically. We don't have to tell it. So just keep that in mind. Your colors may not be as vibrant. Let's look at advanced. Oh, those were our advanced options. Okay. And we can actually pick the background color now, but we're just going to leave it white, which is the default, because I just want you to get used to the defaults. And go ahead and click Create. Give it a second, my computer is just a little slow. Give it a second, my computer is trying to run too many things at once, so. There we go. So now we have a blank page in Photoshop. Did it ask us to make if we could make multiple pages? No. Okay, it didn't ask us because in Photoshop you can only make one page at a time. So with this, with one page at a time, let's go up to Window, and there's a layer, there's a, oh, actually it's down here now. So go down to your bottom right, and you'll see Layers, and double click that. And remember in InDesign how our layers were like shelves? They could hold multiple items a piece, but you could still take them and move them around. In Photoshop, each item is its own layer. So every text box is its own layer. Every shape is its own layer. Every image you place in is its own layer. So, with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new layer. We're going to start off with the background layer. So down at the bottom, down here we have kind of this little box with a plus sign. You can click that and create a new layer. But I want to create a layer that fills my whole background color without me making a shape. So in InDesign, to make a background color, we had to make a whole shape, right? In Photoshop, we don't. If you go just to the left, about 2 places over from where that add new layer are, the dimensions were 24 inches by 18 inches. So if you go over, you'll see this kind of like, you know those black and white cookies you get at like New York bagel shops? 2J's has them. You get like the New York deli. So click that. That's your black and white cookie. And if you click that, these are all different ways you can edit your photos. So you can add a black and white layer and just the black and white that way. You can change the hue and saturation. And these all add a new layer. So you could literally have layers above them that aren't affected. Anything that is below one of these layers is affected. So again, we're stacking. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to click solid color because we want a solid color background. And guess what came up? A color picker. It's similar to InDesign. This one is just much more user-friendly. So what colors do you typically see on political signs? Red, white, and blue are true American colors. So let's pick a color. What color do we want the background? Let's pick blue. Okay. And why are we picking blue? Blue's a little bit more trustworthy. I want my voters to trust me and know that they're getting the right candidate. Okay? So I'm picking blue for that reason. No. You guys pick a blue, a red, a white, whatever. So you guys pick your own. And hit OK. So you're going to go down to the black and white cookie, down at the bottom right. See, that was a fill or an adjustment layer. So you can make your changes there. If you decide, I don't like that shade of blue, you can go to where the thumbnail is of that layer and double click it and change your color. So I don't like this blue. It's kind of a little bright. I like that blue. All right. So now we need to make a new text layer. Does anybody remember the shortcut in InDesign for the text tool? It was T. So guess what in Photoshop? If you hit T, you get the text tool. The text tool isn't up towards the top, it's actually towards the bottom this time. And instead of drawing out a text box, all you have to do is click once and you can start typing. And if you notice, You will have to turn this in for an assignment. It's so tiny, I know. But you can either change your font up at the top. You can either change your font there, or click your selector tool. In Photoshop, it's actually the move tool. So it's like a crossed arrow. So you click your move. Oops, I'm sorry, not the artboard. Click the move tool. Same shortcut. The shortcut is V. No, not till we're done with the lecture. And if you click the move tool, it's the same shortcut as the selector tool. So it's V. You can actually move it. So we're moving this just one layer. And if you want to make it bigger, you can use the transform command, which is Control T. This is one of those commands you're going to want to memorize. Control T, and then you can drag it. Notice in Photoshop, no matter how I drag it, it keeps it in proportion. So that was one of the most recent updates, is it actually keeps it in proportion whenever you drag it. But if you want it out of proportion, like you actually want to change out of proportion, you click and drag, and then you hold Shift. And Shift undoes the proportions this time. Control Z. So if you mess something up, it's the same as InDesign, Control Z. So see, I kind of messed this up. I really don't like that, so I'm going to hit Control Z. And notice in my layers, I have a layer named My Name here. It kind of automatically named it. I have my color fill, and I have my background. So let's move this towards the center. And to get out of the transform, you can either click the check mark up at the top or hit enter. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to make this mine. So go ahead and add your name there. And again, up here you can change left, center, right align. And if you notice, it actually changed my font size. Originally it was like 35 points. When we resized it, it changed my font size for me. I'm going to go pick a font. What kind of font should I pick? Serif, sans serif, display? What should I pick? Let's pick a sans serif. I'm going to pick, I want something that's nice and chunky because I want it to be in your face. I want you to know my name. So I'm going to look for impact. I guess I don't have impact. Oh, yes, I do. I do have impact. I know, my computer is running a lot more. You can choose a font to your preference. That is fine. I picked impact because I want a chunky font. Give me a second. My computer is running really slow. So go ahead, select the font you want. So say over here I made too many layers. I can click on the layer and then click the little trash can down at the bottom and actually delete that layer. It does automatically put down the words lorem ipsum. Lorem ipsum is basically fake type. So with lorem ipsum, anytime you need to place, like you need to see how the text is going to look, but you don't actually have any text, so it's called filler text. Or you can click and drag the layers down to delete them. So, now I have Miss Brown. I'm going to go ahead and transform that. And I want to make it fill up maybe like this whole section right here. So make sure when you're working on your layers in Photoshop, for whatever reason, you can't, this isn't like InDesign where you can just kind of click around. You actually have to go and select the layer and then do what you want to do. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's make my name real big. Use your first name, your last name, whatever. What? Control T is transform. If you need to change the color of the background, remember you can double tap the layer and click the check mark. So do we want to keep the text black or we want to change color? We'll change it to white. So if I go back to my type tool, actually, if you select the layer, you don't have to use the type tool, but if you just select the layer and you go down here and hit set foreground color, remember down in InDesign, this is how we pick the fill and the stroke. Now we can select foreground color. Jalen, you have to go to the black and white cookie and click that and click solid color. But to change the color of the type, we're going to go ahead and go back to our type tool, highlight it, so Control A, click up at the top, kind of the center, where there's a black box, and we're going to change our color. So let's change it to white. Now, in Photoshop and InDesign, there's these things called up in your window. We have character and character style. So let's open up character. So go up to window and open up the character panel. Here, this is another place you can change the font. You can change typeface, you can change the font. You can change, this is a drop cap, I believe. Oh, nope, that's font size. So you can change your font size. You can change your leading. Does anybody remember leading? Leading is the space in between lines. You can change your kerning. What's kerning? If you hover over these, they'll actually tell you what they are. So set the kerning between two characters, which means is the space between two individual characters. Or we can set our tracking. Tracking is the space across the whole, anything you have highlighted. So if I change my tracking to say 50, It changes my spacing in between all my letters. But I'm going to keep it at 0 because it's pretty good so far. We can change the vertical scale, which means we can make it taller and shorter. We can change the horizontal scale, make it wider or thinner. My suggestion is very, very little do you actually change the horizontal and vertical scale unless you are really getting artistic, because you don't ever want to stretch your type. If you stretch your type, or if you stretch it or squish it, it's noticeable and it looks bad. It looks amateurish. You can set what is called the baseline. So the baseline is where your type sits. It's what it's sitting on. In elementary school, you had those sheets of paper where it's the blue line, the blue dotted line, and the red line. And you had to write all your characters so they sit on that red line. So that's the baseline. You can change where that is. So you can even change it for each individual letter if you want. These are the same in InDesign, Photoshop, and Illustrator. All have the same panel. They may look slightly different in between them, but they're pretty much, they have the same things you can manipulate. Down below the baseline, oh, there's color, by the way. We have all these different T's down here. So if we hover over each one, we get faux bold. So you're faking your bold. You can fake an italic. Let's never use these. We're not going to be like Microsoft Word, and if there's not a bold, we just add one on. No. You're going to either use a bold or you're going to use a font that is bold, that has a bold variation. Same thing with italic. We're not going to fake an italic. You're going to use a font that has an italic. Now, we can make it all caps. So just by clicking this one button, it's going to switch all my type that I have highlighted to all caps. Or it's supposed to be. So see how you click the button and you turn it on and it becomes darker? That means it's on. So as long as I keep typing, it's going to stay on. If I turn it off, then it's all going to go back to regular case. We can make small caps. The small caps are when you kind of use the capital letters, but you use them at like a small size. Don't do this unless you have a font that's already small caps. Because if you notice, my M is super thick, but my S is not as thick. It's skinnier. So with that, it's not very good. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look balanced. So we're going to turn that one off. And we're going to go back to my all caps, because I just see them always in all caps. You can make a superscript like your exponents in math. You can make a subscript. You can underline them, or you can strike through them, kind of like Word. My best bet is don't use underline, don't use strike through. Because you can do that by doing it your own shape and you can control it better. Otherwise, you can't control these underlines. You can't control how thick it is or anything. Down here, so there's a thing called ligatures. So if there are certain letters next to each other, such as F and I, S and T, there's these things called ligatures, which are special characters that kind of almost melded the two, so you can read them perfectly fine, but they just shorten it just enough, especially if you're struggling with putting a lot of type on something. That's sometimes a good way to do it. There's alternatives, and then there's fractions and ordinals, so first, second, third. So these are things you can kind of play around with when you're messing with your type. So now, okay, Miss Brown's a little too big. I'm just going to do a quick, my computer can be quick today. Quick resize. All right. And just like in InDesign, you can use the Alt key. So if you hold down Alt and you hover over this, you'll see I get the black and white arrows, the double black and white arrows. With that, I can click and drag and duplicate my layer. If I want to click and drag and I want to keep them all aligned, I would hold Shift at the same time too. So, what else is usually on a political yard sign besides my name? What am I running for? So what am I running for? President of the classroom? President of room 124. And that's really big. So again, I'm going to have to go back to my move tool, Control T it, and notice how even though it runs off into this pasteboard over here, you can't see it. So in InDesign, you have that pasteboard where you can place items there that aren't going to print. In Photoshop, while they're still there, and you can see that I have you can see where my bounding box is, so you can still go back and grab the files. You can't see anything that bleeds off the edge, so you don't know. So you are literally only seeing what will print. And one thing in design, if you have just big type, like a yard sign or something that you easily want to just look good, if you take it all and you make everything fit so it's the same width, not the same font size, but just the same width across the page, it automatically looks good. So that's kind of a little tip. If you automatically want something to look good and you just have a couple pieces of big type, just make them all the same width, and basically you're making them fit into a square. All right, what other information is found on my... Yeah, maybe a vice president. Everyone knows voting day is November 3rd. Always. What about my slogan? So, again, hold down Alt. So you get those black and white double arrows. Hold down Alt and click and drag again. What's my slogan? So what should be my slogan if I'm running for the president of room 124? Alt and then click and drag. And if you hold down space, that's how you can move about your page. So it's the hand tool, just like in InDesign. Control T. What? Layers? Make new layers? Delete. Down at the bottom of the layers panel, on the bottom right, there's a little trash can. Now, when you look at signs, you kind of remember, they kind of chunk out your name and what you're running for. So your name and what would be considered your title. So it would be President Brown instead of Miss Brown. And then your slogan's a little bit farther away. So we'll move my slogan down some. And all right. So now we have our information that's on there. Now we need to add some graphics. What kind of graphical elements do you guys see on political signs? What? Pretty minimal. We see stars. We see lines and strokes. So while it's usually kept pretty minimal, there's not a lot of images or graphics or what's going on. There's usually a couple stars and maybe some lines. So if you go off on the left-hand side, and you're going to have to go below the text tool, and you'll see your rectangle tool is back. Again, same keyboard command of U. So let's go ahead and take that, and let's add in one big chunky dark box. If you'll notice, I get properties. And if you notice under your layers, it made a new layer called Rectangle 1. If we go up towards the top, so you'll have to make sure you're still on the shape tool, you'll see fill and stroke. Let's go ahead and change our fill. And I'm going to actually use the dark blue from earlier. I'm going to keep mine blue. So now I have this nice big thick line. And when you're at your move tool, if you just want to move it just a tad, you don't want to move it a lot, you can actually use your arrow keys on your keyboard. You just want to move it just ever so slightly. And then I'm going to go back to my shape tool. And if you notice, I have rounded rectangle tool, which we didn't really have before. I still have my ellipse tool. I now have a triangle tool. So I don't just have to go to the polygon tool. I have my triangle tool. I have a line tool, so I can just make my lines. And a custom shape tool. So I'm going to go back to my polygon tool. And same thing, just like in design, if I click once, I get my polygon. I get my star ratio. I'm going to do 75. Number of sides, let's stick with 5. And we get a couple more options. So we get symmetrical, smooth star indents. So symmetrical is going to keep it all in proportion. Smooth star indents and from center. So I'm going to do from center. Are you on the polygon tool? Okay. Maybe it might be a little different. Wow, mine's really stretched. So I'm going to have to go back to my move tool. Go too many stars. I'm going to go back to my star and let's get it in proportion. But remember, I want to get it out of the proportion it's already in, so I'm going to have to hold shift to force it out of proportion. Remember, hold shift to be able to click and drag it out of proportion. And if I want to change my color of it, I'm going to have to make sure it's selected, and then you can either open up the properties panel, so go to window and go to properties. It's sometimes a little bit easier than having to constantly go back to the shape tool. Or it's this one where it looks like lines with circles on it, like they're sliders. And double click your fill. Should I make mine red or white? I should make mine red. You go down to the shape tool, Jalen. You go down to the shape tool and you click there and you click and drag. Let's find a red, kind of pinkish. There we go. That's a good red I like. And hit OK. And what I'm going to do is, because I kind of want it to like be cut out a little bit, so I'm going to make mine smaller. But I don't like how that blue is like right next to the red because it's super bright. So I'm going to click the stroke, and I'm actually going to use the color from the background and give my thing a stroke. And I'm going to have to increase my stroke size. You got to go to your polygon tool, remember? You click it, same way in InDesign. You click once, and then it's going to ask you what the star inset, how many sides, and stuff like that. But you notice I put a stroke of the same color that is my background color. And when I did that, it just makes it look like it kind of got cut out. And if you notice, while I'm moving my star around, I get these like little pink lines all of a sudden appearing. They're telling me how can I align my stuff. So if I get a pink line that goes from top to bottom here, then that means I am dead center of my artboard of my page. Okay? Alright. So once you get this made, then you'll do File, Save As. You're going to save on your computer. Don't save to the cloud for this one. And you're going to save it as, when you save as, it's going to be a .psd. That means Photoshop file. Name it Brown Yard